Can Battlefield kill Call of Duty? That seems to be the question on everybody's mind right now, and I've played Battlefield 6 for a dozen hours or so. Thank you, EA, hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored, etc. And so in this video, I'm going to give you my brutally honest first impressions of the game, coming from the perspective of the exact target audience that EA needs to win over. I main Call of Duty. That is my main game. And I dabble with other shooters like Destiny, Rainbow Six Siege, maybe a little bit of Apex here and there. I've played some Splitgate, but Battlefield has really lost me as a player in the last couple of years. And so I think that whether or not I am won over should be quite a representative sample for what you might experience if you're in a similar position to me, wondering if this game is going to work for you. So we're going to need to break this down into different sections. We're going to start with the core multiplayer experience, because that's what I've been playing. And then we're going to talk about some of the other more fringe parts of the game, like map editors and battle royales and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. But we'll get there. First, we've got to talk about the fundamentals, and that begins with the multiplayer. So, one thing I can emphatically say about Battlefield 6 is that it is a very strong Battlefield game. It does the things that Battlefield does well in very strong ways. So, for example, those only in Battlefield moments that you can imagine where someone's jumping out of a plane and then they're like firing an RPG at another plane and they're jumping back into their plane and they're doing all those sorts of crazy Michael Bay moves. That stuff all feels very possible in the game. It feels like the sandbox is there to elevate those sorts of crazy cinematic action moments. And that makes it really frenetic, chaotic, and really fun. And it doesn't need to be super high skill stuff either that ends up being fun in those sandboxy moments. It can just be quirky little things like having a tank rolling towards you, quickly swapping to an RPG, blowing the tank up as it approaches, and then the tank's kind of flaming chassis ends up flying over your head in a blazing fireball, and you're like, hell yeah, I did that. That was cool. Like, those little moments happen fairly frequently, I would say, in the game. And that is a large chunk, in my opinion, of what always made Battlefield fun back in the day. Like, that was one of the founding principles of the game, I think, is those only in Battlefield moments. Then on top of that, something that I like that they've improved, I think, in this game is the clunkiness of the gunplay. So historically for me, Battlefield hasn't had the most fluid gunplay in the industry. I think Call of Duty really just has such incredibly smooth gun feel that sometimes Battlefield felt a little bit too, I don't know, chunky and blocky, and guns felt a bit too heavy sometimes. And these are all things that can absolutely add to your immersion and can add to your sense of realism and things, but they don't necessarily make for the most fluid and frictionless gunplay in the world. And I'm pleased to report that the gunplay in Battlefield 6 feels really solid. I never really ran into any issues where I was like, damn, this feels horrible. Like, in fact, a lot of the time, the weapons felt really, really nice. And this is a combination of great animations, great overall weapon designs, some strong attachment choices that you're offered, and also great sound. The sound of the weapons is stellar. It's very, very strong. And another thing I like about what they're doing with the weapons is Call of Duty multiplayer in recent years has kind of started falling down this strange rabbit hole of you shoot your gun, and there's so much gun smoke that you can't even see where you're shooting after like 2 seconds. Like, it's actually infuriating to just feel like you can't see anymore because you started firing your weapon. And in my experience thus far, that is a non-issue ever in Battlefield 6. It's absolutely clean, pristine. The gun just shoots and you can see your target, and it's great. Now, there are one or two sort of exceptions to this that we'll talk about in a moment in some of the negatives, but for the most part, the clarity when firing your weapon is very, very good. Now, speaking of weapons, we also need to talk about one of the, I think, smart decisions that they've made with regard to classes in this game. So Battlefield's experimented with classes over the years, and different iterations of its class systems have been loved or hated depending on the game. And I think they've got quite an interesting system in this one, where if you are running the medic class, for example, you will get a small bonus for using a specific weapon type, but you will not get that bonus if you're using other weapons with that class. Similarly, if you're on the recon class, yeah, if you use a sniper, you're going to get a small bonus. But if you use, I don't know, like an SMG on the recon class, you're not going to get that small bonus. And this means that you can still use any weapon with any class, as far as I have been able to understand, but you won't get that little additional bonus that makes your kit synergize that much better. And I think it's a good middle ground because it gives you that flexibility without completely restricting what you use. I also have to give EA some credit here because from what I've played so far, bearing in mind that this is over 2 months before release, it is very polished. This is not something I was expecting. I was expecting there to be a huge number of bugs. I was expecting a huge number of glitches and game crashes as well, especially because I've been recording the game on the same PC that I'm playing it on. I was just expecting it to be a bit of a mess because video games in 2025, more often than not, don't feel like they launch polished. Like, that's just no longer a common thing, I feel like. But from what I've played so far, speaking strictly from my experience, the game didn't crash a single time, and the greatest extent of bug that I had was that a texture on the floor was shinier than it should have been, and it meant that it looked like a sniper glint when actually it was just a puddle. That's it, which is crazy to say because there's a world where you would be falling through the map and there'd be all sorts of crazy stuff going on, but no, it's actually been very smooth so far, and my performance hasn't been bad either. I've been getting stable frame rates, so at least speaking to my personal experience, obviously we don't know what it's going to be like on everybody's systems until everybody plays it, but on my system, it's been smooth so far, which is worth some commendation. So you might think from everything I've just said, wow, Call of Duty is screwed. Like, Battlefield is going to kill Call of Duty, right? But now let me talk about some of the negatives that I've experienced, because I want to be completely transparent with you guys about what I didn't like. So first of all, I think Battlefield's in a challenging spot this year because they want to compete with Call of Duty, right? And if there's ever a year to do it, it's got to be this one. Like, people are really feeling Call of Duty franchise fatigue, whether it's the creators that have been burned by Activision, whether it's the players that have been burned by Activision, whether it's the players that have been burned by cheaters and by overindulgence of microtransactions and like all these sorts of crazy things. Battlefield has a great opportunity this year, and that means that I think there's a little bit of attention being paid within the dev studio to thinking, how can we make Call of Duty players excited about our game? And with that has come a couple of things. Number one, there are some smaller maps in the game, and it's not shipping with a huge number of maps. So the fact that these small maps are there is pretty significant. Like, that's pretty telling about their dev spend. And those smaller maps, you can play things like Team Deathmatch on, for example, and it really feels like they are more infantry focused. Like, the Battlefield flavor of tank combat and jet combat and helicopters and all those crazy vehicles feels really reduced on those smaller maps, and it feels much more like a ground war game, for example. The domination feels like that as well. Feels like ground war. And unfortunately for me, it didn't really feel like it worked. There's one map, I think it's called like the Coast of Iberia or like something like that. And it's a smaller map when you're playing it in TDM. And it just felt like the flow didn't work. Like, one thing that COD has had lots of practice with over the years is designing, whether it's its 3-lane maps or when they move away from 3-lane, just whatever replacement they have for it in a given year that's smaller and more dense, right? And I didn't really feel like Battlefield had nailed the smaller map philosophy. It felt like there were just sort of lots of corridors, and I don't know, it wasn't really clicking with me in the way that a Call of Duty map often does when it's one of those smaller banger maps. So that left me sort of wanting a little more. And I also noticed that on those smaller maps, all of the core Battlefield creators weren't really having the best of times. Like, all of them were like, I want to go back to Conquest. Like, I want to play Conquest on a big map. Can we play Conquest on a big map now? Can we do that? Can we do that now? Can we do that? And so it's this kind of awkward blend of trying to bring the frenetic arena shooter of kind of Call of Duty combat to Battlefield, while also pleasing the Battlefield people. And it wouldn't surprise me if there ends up being a little bit of polarization maybe in the community about which maps are best and stuff like that, depending on the background of the player that happens to be rating it at a given time. Now, that's another thing that I think may be a slight problem with this game at launch, but we'll talk about why this is not that big an issue in a second. And that's because there are some of these smaller maps and smaller experiences, and you'll sort of play Breakthrough or something, and you'll just sort of get stuck as well, so it feels like that's a pretty contained experience too. It means that there's not always a massive amount of space to breathe and do the only in Battlefield stuff. Like, the massive Battlefield moments that I was talking about earlier in the video of like jets flying around and crashing into buildings and blowing stuff up while there's like 50 people all running one way and 50 people running another, and there's a load of tanks and everything's going crazy. Like, that works best when it's big, right? You need the space. Otherwise, if you're in a jet, you cover the whole map in like 10 seconds. It doesn't really work, right? So you need that room to breathe, and it felt like because of the slightly more limited map selection, you didn't have that space to breathe as often, and I think that maybe hurts the sandbox just the tiniest bit. That's probably something to look out for if you're a hardcore Battlefield fan, expecting it to be very expansive at all times. I would sort of reel in your expectations in that regard. Now, another general comment that is a negative for me is that, like I said, I'm a COD fan, and I don't really feel like this Battlefield game has done anything to the Battlefield gunplay or just overall rhythm of a match to make me more excited about it than I would have been in the past playing a different Battlefield game. Like, it still feels like Battlefield. And let me be clear, because I know that there are going to be people that misconstrue what I'm saying in the comment section. The fact that it feels so Battlefield is good. It needs to feel Battlefield to sell the game to Battlefield fans. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a good thing that it feels so strongly Battlefield. But I think for the lobby of people that are hoping that Battlefield kills COD, I think in order for it to actually kill COD, it would basically need to become COD. And it's not becoming COD. And that's good. In my view, that is a good thing, but that does mean that I just do not see this game beating COD. I just don't see it happening, because it just doesn't feel like COD. It doesn't feel like the sort of game that I could jump into and feel like I have some control over the flow of a match. Like, that is not there. You're constantly in a swirling tornado of gunfights of 5 different angles. You don't have a singular sightline or maximum 2 sightlines. You've got 7 sightlines on you at any given time. It's chaos. You're constantly dying. It's a war of attrition. And I think that's part of the experience that Battlefield fans love. It's just that Call of Duty fans play the game in a slightly different way, and I'm not sure that the way they play is going to resonate with them in the Battlefield, because the game doesn't really elevate those sorts of experiences. It's a lot more, you are just one pawn in an absolute army, a swirling mass of bodies flinging themselves towards the objective, right? And that's a little different to the COD mentality in my view. And I also think that as much as it's emphatically a Battlefield game, it didn't really feel like they were taking any massive swings at bat. Like, the risks being taken are not really very clear. And to be honest, I actually think that that's fine, because we've had some maybe slightly more risky Battlefields in the last couple of years, and I don't think they've been very good, in my view. So a safe, solid, run-of-the-mill, but proficient Battlefield game is something that I welcome with open arms. But you should not be jumping into this game expecting it to revolutionize first-person shooter combat, because it doesn't. It's just more Battlefield, but Battlefield can be fun, so that's not necessarily a problem. Now let me talk about the two things now that kind of blow all of this stuff out of the water a little bit. They're things that we know very little about, but they're worth discussing because they are going to be the make or break elements of this game, in my opinion. So, we're going to start with map editing features. In previous Battlefield games, we've had options to make custom games and stuff like that, and in my opinion, it's never really felt like it's taken off and gone viral. Like, they've been fun, there's been fun that can be had. I remember, I think, if I recall correctly, it was even in 2042, I had some fun in the custom games, just inviting my viewers in and doing some sort of silly rule sets and stuff. Like, there was some fun to be had there, but they never went viral, right? They never broke out beyond Battlefield. And I think that in this game, they really have an opportunity to say, you know what, with our map editor, we're gonna allow you to do all of these crazy things that you guys have probably seen, right? Like, we're gonna allow you to construct platforms and entire geometry of your own volition. We're gonna allow you to build, like, only up in Battlefield. We're going to allow you to do all these crazy game modes that do have a bit more viral potential, and essentially, we're going to allow you to use Halo 3 Forge in Battlefield. Like, that seems to be the direction they're going in. And I think it's very, very positive that they're going in that direction, but I want us to all keep our thinking hats on here and consider the fact that just because they've got good tools doesn't automatically mean this stuff is going to go viral. Because if the game doesn't sell in the first place, then no one's going to be using the tools, right? So one thing that I think Battlefield should do, and specifically EA should do, is I think they should look into getting a large pool of community creators. I'm not talking content creators, I'm talking map builders. And they should either directly pay them or incentivize them with, like, support a creator the way that Fortnite does it, but basically get some money into those people's pockets in exchange for them all making some really creative custom maps for the game to launch with. So I don't mean pre-downloaded, but I just mean day one on that custom maps screen. You should be able to click on there and see only up. You should be able to see some kind of maze thing. You should be able to see, like, I don't know, a Super Mario or something like that. Like, you should be able to see a really broad variety of different unique game modes to get the community's brains whirring about, oh my god, did you know the new Battlefield just launched and you can play Portal in it? Or, like, the new Battlefield is out now and it's got races like GTA Online has races. Like, those sorts of things need to be there at the beginning, in my opinion, in order for the viral flywheel to really spin. And that's just going to come down to whether or not EA has the foresight to make that happen. So that's something I really want to see. And I then want to see them to continue to invest in the people actually making those maps. And that's why some kind of support a creator situation where if you make a map, you can get some kind of kickback would be really, really beneficial to the ecosystem, because then people are going to actually bother. And if you don't incentivize them at all, then yes, it might happen by random chance. But if a map creator has the option of making a Fortnite map and getting paid for it, or making a Battlefield map in a game with a smaller player base and getting nothing from it, more often than not, in those scenarios, they're probably going to go to Fortnite, right? So EA needs to recognize that there is a talent need in order for that part of the game to go as big as it could do, and they need to take some steps accordingly. So that's the map editor, Portal, custom games stuff. It's very exciting, but it's only going to be exciting once things get made in it, and just as an idea, there's only so much that we can really say. The other thing that Battlefield 6 is hopefully going to have going for it, as long as the rumors are true and it doesn't get cancelled last minute or anything crazy, is Battle Royale. So you've probably seen for weeks, if not months, actually, the rumors building up to today that basically leaked that there's going to be a battle royale. And I think that we're in an interesting space right now with BRs because obviously Fortnite is the biggest success. It's blown up to a crazy degree. But I think we need to also think about what Apex Legends did and what Warzone did. Because we've seen recently the Battlefield has these very grand aspirations as to how many players it's going to hit. Like, they want to hit 100 million players, which is a crazy big number, and it's only really achievable if you have a free-to-play Battle Royale. I mean, I think some numbers just came out, and 50 million people have played Black Ops 6, and that's Black Ops 6. That's one of the best-selling games every year. It's Call of Duty, right? So to hit 100 mil, that's some serious numbers on the board. So the Battle Royale has to be free. The Battle Royale has to go crazy viral, and we saw Apex go crazy viral and hit some crazy numbers, and we then saw Warzone do a similar thing in the footsteps of the other Battle Royales that came before it. And my concern, I guess, is that Battlefield 6 is a couple of years later, and I question whether there's any Battle Royale that could come out tomorrow that would go so viral that it would replicate the success of Apex, Fortnite, and Call of Duty Warzone and go that big. Like, I just don't know if the culture that we're in right now is down for that. Like, Battle Royales were the hot commodity for a long time, but part of me questions if they're getting, not tired, but they're getting a little bit less sparkly, shiny, new feel. And that might mean that even if it's really fun, people are already kind of entrenched in Fortnite. Like, they've got their skins over there, they're happy with it, they're playing a hell of a lot of Warzone. And as much as the higher levels of Warzone, I think, are unhappy right now, like the more hardcore player base are fairly unhappy from what I've seen, I think that the casuals, as far as I can tell, are having an okay time. So for them to switch over to Battlefield would take some serious work. And I don't know if it's going to happen, transparently. So I really want the Battle Royale to be good because I want there to be a shake-up. I want Call of Duty to stop resting on its laurels and to kind of get a kick up the backside and have to fight for once. Like, COD in general, not just Warzone, but the whole product feels like it's kind of been coasting for a few years. And for Battlefield to really start to scare Call of Duty would be an incredibly positive thing for this industry. But I think that it would be overzealous for me to say to you right now, this game is so good, it's a COD killer. Like, when was the last time we saw COD killer, right? That phrase. I think it was X-Defiant. And what happened to X-Defiant? It got killed. So let's just be wary of throwing around that phrase willy-nilly because actually killing Call of Duty is such a gargantuan task. And I'm going to be completely straight with you guys because as much as I'm sponsored by EA, my integrity and commitment to the truth is the most important thing for me. And this is not a COD killer. It's just not. It's a good Battlefield game. It's something that doesn't strongly resonate with the COD player in me, and that's going to hold it back from being a COD killer. And there are a few things that are up in the air right now where, like, I need to see it perform in other areas beyond the core multiplayer to wow me, because the core multiplayer is so Battlefield coded that it doesn't make me feel like this is going to be my new main game for the next, 3 years. Like, it just doesn't give me that impression right now. It's good, but it's not game of the year. Let me put it that way. So these are first impressions. Things might change, but I've seen a huge amount of crazy hype on Twitter, and I wanted to give a slightly more measured take here because these are my honest thoughts. I think that the game is like a 7 right now from my first impressions. And again, to be super crystal clear, that's not to say it's not fun. I do enjoy the game. I do want to play it more. I want to experiment with the sandbox more as well because I've been playing a limited build and there's going to be more stuff in the sandbox as we get closer to launch. Like, I'm excited to play it more, to stream it more. Like, I want to get into that space and dig. But just for now, first impressions wise, it's Battlefield, okay? It's not the best game ever made, and some of the Twitter hype has got a little overboard, and I want to make sure that you guys aren't disappointed when you get the game and it's another Battlefield game. You know what I mean? So I've been MrRoflWaffles. Hopefully this very general take on the game from my dozen hours of playtime is something that you've enjoyed. If you'd like to see more measured takes from me, then please leave me a comment and let me know. That would be really appreciated, especially when I'm covering other games that aren't my main game. So drop me a comment, and outside of that, I'll be probably streaming some Battlefield as well in the next few days and weeks. So hopefully I'll see you in those streams and we can see how my opinion continues to develop over time. Thanks for watching, folks. I've been MrRoflWaffles. I'll see you then. Bye for now.